All right, welcome to the narrated version of the Introduction to the Creative Problem Solving Essay. This presentation is specifically designed for my EN 102 STEM students and my EN 100 students. In both of those sections, your next essay will involve some creative problem solving, some lateral thinking, and an attempt at trying to show off that you can have some original, innovative thoughts. So let's get into it. So I wanted to start with this gorgeous picture of somewhere I've never been to make two initial selfish points. One point is I would like to go to there, and I would do almost anything to get there under these circumstances. I'm recording this during COVID, so trying to hang on to positive thoughts. The other reason I wanted to show you this slide now is some of you have trouble with the lingo. You don't like the term problem. It's a problem solution essay. That's the whole point of the next unit. And you resist the idea of problems or the negativity implied by the word problems, feel free to switch out the word problem with the word objective. As you think about the next essay, you're trying to describe multiple ways to get to one objective. So as an example, let's say my objective was to get to that location. All right, so my problem now is what are the things in between me and being on that boat narrating from inside that outrigger instead of my house in Kaisertown. So you want to think about the things that are in the way of your objective. Part of the point of the essay is going to be analyzing different aspects of a problem and kind of deciding which elements you want to solve using some cause and effect logic. For me, it's pretty obvious. Financial. There is a financial wall between me and living in that location. So I kind of know that's the main problem I need to solve. I don't have enough money to be living there right now. So the next step would be, well, what are different ways that I could approach that problem? If I've defined my objective as getting to that location, the problem is I don't have enough money to do it. So I might come up with something obvious. Wait until I retire and keep putting money into savings, TIAA, CREF, investments, stock returns. That sounded like a better idea before COVID, but it's an option. So that might be one solution to that problem. Second solution, maybe I pick something more streamlined, something a little bit more direct, like robbing a bank. That has the advantage of being much more efficient in terms of the timeline. Could rob the bank tomorrow and be in that location, hopefully, within a few days. Advantages and disadvantages. Maybe I find a rich widow who's close to the end and I secure her affections to make sure that I'm secured in the will. All right, there I've got three separate options, three potential solutions to that problem. And the whole point here is take everything, any possibility that your brain creates. If you're brainstorming, write it down, think about it as one solution. We'll worry about the logistics and the pros and cons later. As I said, I'm doing this during the COVID outbreak, so I'm really trying my hardest to strip everything down just to its simplest and most essential components. So if you wanted only two main points, what are the two main concepts you're trying to get out of the next lesson? First one would be analyzing cause and effect. If you already know the difference between causation and correlation and the nightmares that can arise if you confuse one with the other, excellent, you have a head start. I'm going to have to do at least one entire video just on that. It's an important concept. It's a little slippery and a little difficult, but that's one of the two main points for this next unit. The other one is what this presentation is going to focus on, which is creative problem solving, using lateral thinking to try to approach a problem from multiple directions. So I know a few of you, like a subset of you, are going to enjoy the creativity aspect of this. You're already creative, you're already used to thinking laterally and thinking outside the box. So you're going to take to this assignment, particularly when it comes to the solutions. But that leaves about 2/3 of you that are going to struggle with the creativity aspect of the assignment because you're not used to it. I don't know what public school is good for, especially in New York State, if not squashing your creativity with standardized tests. So you're going to have to get used to flexing and stretching in terms of how you approach a problem and making sure you don't get stuck in a rut, only approaching the problem from the same angle over and over again. All right, so now let's actually try some practice, some warm-ups with lateral thinking, see how you do, get your feet wet. and I'll explain how this might help for the actual essay itself. So next slide is going to be a picture, and I want you to just try to metacognitively notice your reaction to the picture. I modified it slightly, and really all I'm asking is, could you guess what you're looking at? In other words, as soon as you see the image, just start formulating some opinions as to what you think you're looking at. We'll go from there. So here is a thing. You have no idea what it is. Just kind of notice your brain start to formulate an opinion. What is the first 2 or 3 things that pop into your mind as you try to assess what this object actually is? So obviously, eventually I'm going to have you just jot down some ideas, like list things that you think this object is. But let me give you a few hints just so you have a little bit of context. So what you're looking at right now is a patent illustration. So that just means this is a drawing of somebody's invention. It came from the 1970s, if you want to factor that into your calculus. And again, I've just photoshopped it enough to make it a little bit less obvious what the point of the invention is. But you can see the entire invention. I didn't erase any components. I just erased some of the context. So don't write anything down yet, but if I did ask you to commit to one answer, what do you think this object actually is? What is this invention's purpose? So this is a key metacognitive moment because I wanted to find out if your first answer was gross. In other words, if you looked at this and your 14-year-old teenage brain was engaged, you might have immediately made some very disgusting, gross, and inappropriate assumptions, and that's okay. That's a good teachable moment where you say, all right, here was my first reaction. Let's make sure I can hack my own brain, think laterally, and not get stuck in a rut. So before I give you the actual exercise for this little mini lesson, and honestly, the workout itself is literally just going to be create a list on a piece of paper, physically write this list down of as many possible uses for this device as you can come up with. So that could be what the person intended it for or other uses beyond that. And you're just going to see how many you can come up with. But before you do that, I wanted to give you a 3-dimensional look. The previous diagram was a 2-dimensional schematic for this invention. Here's what the thing physically looks like in the real world. If you want scale, I believe that's a coffee cup in the back. And even if it's not, that gives you a sense of how big or small this object is in the real world. That's a ping pong ball in one end of the object. I think it's fair to give you that hint. So this is what the thing looks like in real life. Right now, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and literally just write down as many uses for this as you can think of. Make sure you come up with 5. If your first answer or your first theory as to what this thing is was gross, write that one down too. If you thought this was a sex toy or something along those lines, get used to writing the wrong answer down. The whole point of this is when you're brainstorming, you want to turn your filter off and you want to just come up with as many different ideas as possible. So take 2 minutes right now, make it a little game for yourself. This is sort of like how many jumping jacks can you do in 2 minutes, except that we're working out your lateral thinking. So see how many possibilities, how many ideas you can come up with. If your first answer was gross, write that one down too. If you thought this was a sex toy or something along those lines, put that on the top of the list. Just get used to being wrong. Shoot for at least 5. Maybe you can get into 10 or 15. If you're competitive, the record for 2 minutes in a live class was 36. Somebody came up with 36 different possibilities as to what the use of this device is. So make a game for yourself. Take exactly 2 minutes or more if you want. And let's see how many options you can come up with. How many possible uses can you think of for this device? All right, just count up your answers. It's not important whether or not you landed on the right answer. So when I finally tell you what this thing actually is, don't feel bad if it wasn't in the list. What's more important is you're getting your brain used to coming at the same thing from multiple angles and with enough stamina that you can keep that going. So hopefully you got at least 5. That's good. That means you're, flexible enough to work on this essay. If you got more than 10, you're probably an outside the box thinker. If you were able to come up with 10 or more possibilities in 2 minutes, you're in pretty good shape. If you got more than 15, this essay will probably be pretty easy for you. You're already a very creative lateral thinker. So here's the totally unphotoshopped version of the original patent drawing. Obviously, it's a mousetrap, and if you happen to come up with the correct answer in your list, that's impressive. Most of you wouldn't, and that's okay. But if you happen to say this is a humane, gravity-fed mousetrap that works on a pivot, excellent. You're not only thinking laterally, but you're good at taking a picture like this, which is pretty conceptual, and figuring out the engineering of what that might look like in the real world. So two main takeaways that I want you to be thinking about as how this might apply to your lesson. One is that the actual invention itself is an example of some very creative problem solving in action. This thing looks simple once you understand how it works. The mouse crawls in, there's a little pivot, the mouse's gravity works against it, and then the ping pong ball fills the hole, so then the mouse is trapped on the basis of its own gravity. That's kind of a masterpiece of engineering, though, if you didn't look at it first. In other words, you only knew your problem was, I want to capture the mouse and I want to keep them alive. Those are my two goals. Those are the parameters that I'm working with. Coming up with this conceptually would require a lot of creativity and a lot of lateral thinking. The second main takeaway, though, in terms of the essay is just getting used to coming up with some initial answers in the brainstorming process, for instance, and being willing to push past the obvious ones. So if you looked at this and you said, this is obviously a sex toy, it looks so much like a penis, it has to be related to something like that, that's okay. You just want to make sure you say, here's my first assumption, and always be willing to have the stamina to move past that. So here's just a few final points as I close out this first experimental trial run of a mini lesson. First point to make is that creativity is hard. Outside the box thinking is difficult. Being able to think laterally is a challenge, and I'm tempted to blame public schooling and standardized testing in America for that. But for whatever reason, we all started out creative. Most of you liked to doodle when you were younger. You kind of liked all different kinds of music. You weren't stuck in one way of thinking. And just through the course of becoming a college-age adult, most of us lose that. Most of us get less creative over time. So that's part of the challenge of the essay. The first solution to whatever problem you want to talk about has to demonstrate that lateral, original, outside-the-box thinking, even if it's weird. Second point to make is that lateral creative thinking is a marker of intelligence. So IQ, your intelligence quotient, that's sort of like how tall you are. Whatever your IQ is right now, that's basically what it's going to be for the rest of your life. So if you're over 18, your IQ is your IQ, and that's fine, but there's many other kinds of intelligence. And unlike IQ, creativity is a muscle you can build up over time. So you can't make yourself taller, but you can definitely make yourself stronger. You can definitely get more flexible. You can definitely build your stamina. So to overdo the workout metaphor, think of creativity and lateral thinking as kind of the yoga of the intellectual world. That's you being able to be flexible. And not only is it difficult, but you have to practice it over a long period of time, and you have to practice it frequently. But again, unlike IQ, your baseline creativity is something that you can increase and get better at over time. And the last point to make seems obvious, but let's make it anyway. Not only is lateral and creative thinking difficult, if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's not only a sign of actual intelligence. People will rate your intelligence on your ability to use creative thinking on the fly. Clearly, you're going to have to do a little of it for this essay. You're going to have to be patient. You're going to have that extra stamina. But also, as one last sell, there are a lot of employers that will ask you this question during a job interview. Tell us about a challenge that you faced in your field or in your experience and how you dealt with that challenge. If you can demonstrate creative thinking, lateral problem solving in your answer to that question, that's one of the most attractive answers you can give. There's basically two questions that you'll get in most job interviews. Do you play nice with others? Can you be in a team? Can you kind of work well in a group? That's one question. The other one is, how have you solved problems? What do you do when you confront a challenge or a problem in your field? And if it's a little extra motivation, even if it feels difficult to do the lateral stretching, even if it feels difficult to push yourself past an obvious assumption and try to come at a problem in new ways, it's one of the top 3 most sought after skills in the professional world that you could possibly imagine. All right, I'm going to call it there. I'm going to imagine the sound of notebooks slapping closed and backpacks being zipped. As always, email is the only safe way to get in touch with me until further notice. So email me with any questions, and hopefully a few more of these little mini lessons will trickle out in the near future. All right, good luck. Stay safe out there.